Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Startup Sense podcast. This is your host, Jonah Lupton, and we have another great episode for you today. Today's guest is Chris Kelly. He is the co founder of a company called Survata. The website is survata.com, survata.com. Obviously, that link's in the show notes as well. Their company is currently based in San Francisco, about 25 people. They've raised $7.7 million from investors. And essentially, what they do is they help companies get smarter about their brand. So they're providing intelligence through surveys, helping companies set up those surveys and then find the right people to answer them, to provide, I guess, important feedback for products and services and marketing and ad messages and all that good stuff. So let's welcome Chris to the show and we'll learn more about it. Chris, how are you, man?
I'm doing well, Jonah. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for taking some time to join us today. So talk to us about your company, Survata. What are you guys doing?
Yeah, so as you said, we sell brand intelligence to some of the world's biggest brands. So companies use us to answer a critical marketing questions. So they may want to know whether their advertising is effective. They may want to know whether their website is speaking to customers in the right way. They may want to know whether people who bought their product are thinking about their brand the right way. So how we do that is we're able to track billions of consumer touch points with different brands, which could be everything from an ad impression to a purchase to looking at some specific page on a specific website. And then we can retarget those consumers with our interviews across that big publisher network that we have. So we partner with thousands of different sites and apps, and we have their visitors take one of our hyper-targeted interviews to unlock some type of content that's already on that publisher site or app. So as an example, you can imagine if Jonah saw a specific piece of content online and the brand had tagged that content with Survata, then maybe 2 days later, as you're naturally browsing the web, we could find you on a magazine site, and if we partner with that magazine, then you could answer a few questions to unlock an issue of that magazine, and then your answers, while anonymous, give very specific feedback to that brand because they know that 2 days ago you took that specific action.
So there's a few moving parts there then. So you have your clients, the big brands, the Microsofts, the Samsungs. I mean, you work with a ton of healthcare companies and other startups. I've never seen Foursquare in there. So you have to acquire the clients, and then you have to partner with the publishers, and then find the customers. So, which is the hardest to do? Which one is the biggest challenge?
Yeah, we spend more of our energy trying to get more big brands on the platform. So it's more important for us to find the next major consumer brand than it is to find the next publisher. Just if you think about it as kind of the demand side of our business, that's the piece that we focus more on because our publisher network is large. We work with thousands of different publishers. So
What's
reaching.
like an example of a publisher for someone that's not familiar with that term?
Sure. So it's a wide variety of different types of providers. So we work with some major magazine companies, and you could, in that case, unlock an issue of an online magazine by answering a few questions right there on that magazine site. Or we work with some different mobile apps where you can unlock whatever the mobile app is providing by answering a few questions right there in that mobile app. Or
And
we
what
work.
who are some of those mobile apps that you guys work with?
So it's a wide mix, and we talk about some of them on our site. So we work with divisions within large media companies such as Time and large media companies such as Disney. So it can be
Okay.
at the high end groups like that, or at the small end could be just an individual publisher or individual app maker that wants to allow this to happen within their apps as an additional revenue stream.
Right. Okay. So it's another way for them to monetize their user base as well.
Correct. We're additional monetization stream for those sites and apps.
Okay. And they decide what types of surveys you're soliciting to their users and traffic?
They don't. They don't necessarily even want to have a say in the interviews because if you imagine the scale that we're operating at, that would be a pretty complex matching problem because we don't know what next month's interviews will bring because it depends on
Gotcha.
what those big brands want to ask. So obviously, it's on us to make sure that nothing, of course, inappropriate or of
Right.
course offensive ever reach that publisher network.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's the problem that YouTube is dealing with right now because advertisers were getting, stuck on offensive videos and it totally went against their brand and everything else. So, I mean, I obviously don't expect you guys to be doing stuff like that.
Yeah,
Um,
no, absolutely. So the publisher network is not self-serve. You have to be approved by Survata. So if there was content that would be offensive, then that would never even reach our network from the publisher side. And of course, the brand's questions are anonymous. So if you're answering a few questions online about your eating habits, you may not know that it's the restaurant chain that we're working with
oh, I got
because
you.
they
Okay.
so yeah, unlike in advertising where that restaurant chain's logo would be next to the content. In this case, we're just asking questions that happen to be from the major restaurant chain.
Right. Because if you know the name of the chain, your answers may become biased at that point.
Absolutely. The researchers and the analytics team and the measurement team at those brands, they don't want to bias your answers because, as you mentioned, if you see a restaurant logo and then you're asking about your eating habits, that's a big introduction of bias.
Right. Okay. Now, when did you start this company, and what was kind of your mission back then? And have things changed over time? Meaning, any pivots, or you're really still focused on what you've been doing since the beginning?
Yeah, so we started the company in 2012, at the end of 2012 in Y Combinator, and
Okay.
then it had our public launch in early 2013. And we've always done the exact same core mission of letting companies talk to consumers across this publisher network to get some insight on some type of marketing effort. So that has never changed. What's changed a lot is the amount of technology we have to target the interviews. So when we started, we didn't have the ability to tag a brand's website or their ads or their purchases, all the things we can do now. And we also started at smaller companies. So if you talk to me in 2013, a lot of our customers then would be small businesses and startups that we either knew from being in YC or just being around Silicon Valley. And over the last few years, we've gone up market where we've attracted these bigger brands. And as you've probably heard from others, that logos beget logos. So when you can get a few brand logos on your website, it makes it easier to sell to the next batch of brands.
Now, you're one of the earlier classes of Y Combinator because I can go into Crunchbase and see that you guys only got 17 grand for them, which is kind of their old funding strategy. And a lot's changed at Y Combinator over the last 5 years. The classes have gotten much bigger. But kind of take us back to when you were applying to Y Combinator. What was your reason for wanting to go through the accelerator?
Yeah, I think we were, I guess you're right. By today's standards, we are somewhat the early days. So I think the program started in '05 or '06. So
Oh
it
wow,
had
it's that
the,
old? I didn't realize it was that. It's been around that long. Jeez,
yeah, I mean, you can fact check that, but I know
you
it,
might be right. Yeah.
yeah, I think I want to say '05 or '06, maybe at the latest '07, but I'm pretty sure it was a few years earlier. It started very small, I believe. And of course, this
March.
is
Yeah,
all.
you're right. March 2005 was their first class.
Yeah, there you go. So, yeah, so it had been around. So I say we were the middle years. I wouldn't say we were the
Yeah, right.
early
Yeah.
years. So being the middle years, it certainly changed a lot. We were during that period where they were doing their 17K investment, as you mentioned, and then also offering, I believe, 150,000 or so on convertible notes that everybody in the class had the option to take. So I think everyone did take it. So there was a little more money. I've lost track of what they're doing now. I think the YC investment may have gone up, but the convertible notes from their partners has gone down. I'm not sure where it stands now, but yeah, it certainly was earlier than they are now, but pretty well established. I mean, by 2012, it was clear that Airbnb was going to be a big win for them. It was clear that Dropbox was going to be a big win for them. Companies like Stripe were earlier, but on a good path, and they of course, had some of their early exits by then. So we can't claim we were kind of the the true early days, like the people who did it in '07 or '08 when there was just a few people in a class, because I believe we had over 80 companies in our class. So
Oh, okay.
not as large as they were now, but still fairly sizable.
Yeah, because in the old days it was like 12 or 15, I think, in a class.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's right. I think they would
Okay, so
have a
you
dozen companies.
graduated from Y Combinator. It looks like you raised a $1.7 million seed round from SoftBank, very, very well thought of early stage VC firm, and then Pivot North, who I'm not really familiar with. What was the strategy for them for bringing them on board? I mean, I'm sure back then you probably had kind of the pick of the litter with investors, especially coming out of Y Combinator. So why did you settle on these particular firms?
Yeah, so the two investors, so SoftTech, it's different
What
than
did I say? Did I
SoftBank.
say SoftBank?
Yeah, I think you said SoftBank. Yeah, I think that's
Yeah,
a
they're in the
common
news so
confusion.
much now. It's
They are, yeah, they are. Saw them on the news last night. Yeah,
right.
so
Okay.
yeah,
Not
but
SoftBank. Yeah.
no problem. So SoftTech and Pivot North. So yeah, SoftTech, we met Jeff Clavier, who's the founding partner there and a very well-known seed investor, and his partner Stephanie Palmieri. At I actually met them at a shared space. We were at Founders Den, to give a shout out to Founders Den, a shared space I recommend to any early stage startup that is not ready for their own office yet. And Steph and Jeff heard about us through the Founders Den community, and at the time we weren't even looking to raise, but they had heard that our first few months of being publicly launched were going well, and that there's a lot of uptick on the platform. So they asked us about doing a seed round, and then I had known the founder of Pivot North is a guy named Tim Connors, who's a very well-established venture capitalist. You can look him up. He's spent a lot of time at big Sand Hill Road firms like USVP and even Sequoia, and then started his own fund a few years ago. And I had known Tim back from my days as a Notre Dame student over a decade ago. So I called him and had a 10-year relationship with him, and so he hopped in around. And yeah, that was a fairly painless raise. Because we had two great seed funds that were able to take the whole allotment, and we were able to move forward quickly.
Awesome. Yeah, I've heard Jeff speak a few times at conferences, and I've always said that if I was going to raise money, he's one of the early investors that I'd want in the company. I just like his outlook on everything, and just seems like a very high integrity kind of guy. And he was, one of the first micro VC firms out there. So
He
um,
was, yeah. He pioneered the category. So yeah,
absolutely.
we're lucky to have him and Tim and staff invested in us, and yeah, they've been great supporters of the company since our fairly early days,
Yep.
back when we were a fraction of what we are now.
This is Jonah Lupton, founder of Jewel and host of the Startup Sense podcast. At Jewel, we help entrepreneurs and startup founders build, launch, and grow their companies by providing superior technology, marketing, and consulting services. We help clients of all sizes, budgets, and industries. We put our clients in the best position to raise capital, grow revenues, hire employees, and maximize their profits. For more information or to set up a free consultation with our team, please visit our website at jool.net. That's JOOL.net. Talk about the big brands that you guys work with. I mean, some very impressive clients, on the website under the clients tab, you can see them all. Companies like this don't make decisions, in a day or even a week, probably. There's probably a lot of, what's the right word, hand holding or high touch communication that needs to go back and forth before you get them signed up. So, and that's not like that's going to happen via email or a quick conference call. So, hey, because what's the sales process like to get these big Fortune 500 brands to work with you?
Yeah, you're right. There's certainly a sales cycle. So if you're talking about a large company of a Fortune 500 or Fortune 100 in many cases company working with you, they're not going to agree to a six-figure contract overnight. So there is a sales cycle. And there's a few different ways that they can start a conversation with us. So we have a sales team that might reach out to them. We've been pretty fortunate with our and we don't even do a lot of PR. It kind of happens organically because a company may use us and then publish some of their Survata results. That gets our name out there. Or
Oh,
we've
cool.
had some industry announcements and been covered in great publications like Adweek. And we've actually had some brands call us. So a couple big brands have called us after reading about us in Adweek or an article like that. So we've had some good inbound efforts there. And then the third thing that's helped is referrals. So a lot of the brands hear about us from peers at other groups. So another brand that isn't yet a customer but is on a pilot, so should be a customer soon, is they found out about us from meeting someone at a conference who worked at one of our current customers, and they were both analytics directors, so they were sharing notes on what software they use in their analytics role, and Survata popped up, and we got an intro. So that and things like that happen every month or so. So the referrals are a great sign for us because it means we have happy customers who are willing to tell their peers at other brands that Survata is a platform they should be using.
At one of these food and beverage companies or healthcare companies, I mean, financially, you guys really work with a lot of different industries. Who's the typical contact person or even group inside that company that you guys are working with? Is it sales and marketing, or is it something else?
Yeah, it's marketing, and you're right. Our big categories are CPG and food and beverage, retail, consumer tech, consumer finance. As you see, the common thread there is all those categories are big brands that spend a lot on marketing, and it's the
Right.
marketing group. So we usually sell to the CMO's kingdom. So sometimes the CMO herself or himself will sign our contracts. Sometimes it's a VP of measurement, VP analytics, VP of insights, or sometimes even a director. So it's those types of functions. So it's usually not a sales person. It's usually a marketing person who's using the platform.
And in most cases, the surveys are anonymous, so the people answering those surveys really have no idea what company or brand is looking for that information.
Yeah, so it's anonymous two ways. So the most important thing is to respect consumer privacy. So we don't let brands ask for email address or name or phone number or anything that's considered personally identifiable information in that interview. And because you as a consumer don't want to have to give your name to a brand to unlock the magazine article that you went to. So that's the first thing. So no PII is ever allowed to touch our systems, and we're very strict on that. It's just there's no flexibility for brands there, and obviously we care a lot about that as we're consumers ourselves. We want to make sure that our privacy is respected as we leave a footprint online and then might come across a Survata interview. So that's the one way it's anonymous is the consumer anonymous. The consumer anonymity is protected. And the second piece is, as you mentioned, the brands get to say anonymous. And there are some exceptions where they want to disclose, hi, we're from so-and-so and asking these questions, but that's rare. So 99% of the time, if you're a big analytics group at a big brand, you want to ask questions but not bias that respondent by saying that you're from a specific company.
Now, some of the people listening to this podcast may be starting a company that is hopefully going to sell into Fortune 100s or Fortune 500 companies, and they need to go out and hire some really badass salespeople. What's been your strategy for hiring the right salespeople?
Yeah, so it's hiring salespeople is, of course, something that a lot of startups have on their radar because that's how you grow when you're selling to enterprises. If in the consumer world, of course, you can grow through other means, but in the enterprise world, you have to grow through salespeople. And yeah, I don't think we necessarily have a magic playbook that is miles away from how other companies would think about it. But certainly people who have enterprise sales experience before is helpful, or someone who has shown a track record at a previous company is helpful. And we don't solve too much for domain knowledge. So it's not necessarily critical that you hire someone who has worked at a company that might be an indirect competitor to us or might be in a tangential space. I think what's more important for us is hiring someone who has managed a sales cycle before. To your earlier point, these are not sales that happen overnight. So you want someone who's managed that deal. We can see evidence they've managed fairly complex deals for large contract sizes in some other organization.
What's your favorite story so far? A company that used Survata to do some, deep research on, their advertising, or their products or anything else, and came back with results that just blew them away, or gave them some really really insightful intel.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of fun stories that get posted in our Slack channels on our team Slack when we get those type of, hey, this was game changing insights for us. And there's a bunch. We've had some brands that have used us during periods of crisis communications where they have a kind of disaster happen to their brand, or there's really bad news that you see on television every night, and then they've used us to get daily intelligence on how consumers' opinion is changing. And of course, we can see who's using it, so we can see when the CMO or CEO logs in to look at the data, which is, we know it's having impact. So those are some great moments for us when we can see that we are providing intelligence to brands that are going through some type of news cycle that's playing out on television screens. And then new product announcements are probably the other thing that has that cool factor. So we have worked on getting consumer input and consumer intelligence for brands that then use that intelligence to roll out a new product in 3, 6, 12 plus months. And of course, we can see the product hit the shelves, and something fun we do is we may buy it and raffle it off at the office. So we'll give it away for free to some employee to say, hey, our work actually helped this product get better. So whether it's a food product, or whether it's a new purse, or whether it's something else that is a consumer product, we'll say our work touched this product and made it better. So we're gonna, as a gift to employee, buy it and then give it away at our end of week meeting, which of course leads to the employees joking when we're going to sign Rolex or a car company, so we can give away one of their products.
So this next question is, I like to ask it because I think there's a lot to learn from it, but it's kind of like three pieces to the question, but they all kind of blend together. And that is, you guys have been at this now for going on 5 years. What's been the biggest mistake that you made? What's been the best lesson learned, and what would you do over?
Yeah, no, it's good pieces to think about, and I think every startup ever has made daily mistakes, so there's a lot to learn from that. I think if we were looking back in hindsight, we would have been more aggressive in rolling out some of our technology that we knew that would only have an appetite in the enterprise environment. As I mentioned early on, we served a lot of small businesses, so we were growing quickly through those small business customers. But maybe I was blinded by that growth and should have been starting to build our sales team and build our product to be enterprise ready a bit earlier, maybe a year or a year and a half, or even 2 years earlier, because we knew that was the long-term opportunity. But it's easy to get blinded by the short-term growth just in the small business market. So that's one piece to the first layer of your question. And then the second layer, and I may ask you to repeat it, was around kind of what we
Yeah,
view
I mean,
as something we
lessons learned, I guess. Which that's why all three of those questions kind of blend together. Biggest mistake, lessons learned, and then what would you do differently?
Yeah, so I think I guess the first two are blended together. That
Right.
I think was a mistake and a lesson learned. I guess the lesson that you could take away from that as a founder is kind of know what your big opportunity is, and don't be slow to attack it. Would be kind of the lesson I would take from that. And then the kind of things we would look back and do differently, or things change our perspective on. And we look at these, obviously there's some kind of tactical in the weeds things that every founder would do differently. And I think in a lot of ways, we probably, the thing that I always think about as a founder is the trade-off of being aggressive versus being lean, right? And there are direct trade-offs, and you can read a lot of startup blog posts and startup podcasts like this wonderful one, and you hear different schools of thought, right? You hear people talk about you need to be aggressive, and I think like Uber is probably the example of this at the extreme, where apparently they just are always stepping pedal to the metal and always going full force and not worrying about cash burn. And then you hear examples of people who were very scrappy and were very lean and their whole thing was just to stay alive and keep the company going no matter what. And being lean and being aggressive can at times be a direct trade-off. Not necessarily, but at times there can be a direct trade-off. And I think I probably at times was too lean and not aggressive enough in some periods of our growth. And of course, if you go to either extreme, you're in trouble. if you're too lean, then you don't grow enough. And if you're too aggressive, you can have a bad quarter and run out of cash. So that
Right.
pendulum is always swinging in your head, and you're always trying to get it right.
I mean, how do you think about it in terms of, are you trying to get to cash flow positive or really just trying to grow the top line and keep raising money?
Yeah, our view. So, great question, because it's the critical question I think everyone at our stage, post Series A, thinks about. And at our stage, we're still top line focused. So, when we have this discussion at our board at this stage of the company, we're focused on adding more customers and growing the top line. And if that means we burn cash, then so be it. As long as they're obviously a very strict eye on the cash we're burning to make sure that we're being responsible there. And that's where the decision we have made now. If you talk to me in 18 months or 2 years, especially if we do another funding round by then my answer would probably change. I think after another funding round, there's a good chance that the goal would be to get to break even and turn the shot clock off, so to speak. So then we control our own destiny. So I'm kind of always aware of that. When you're burning money, you don't control your own destiny. You're you're living off of the belief that your investors have in you as a business.
What do you think the company's going to look like in 3 to 5 years? Do you think you'll still be independent, still raising capital, still growing, building, bringing in more brands, or, like other competitors in the space, you guys think you'll get acquired by a large media company or someone else?
Yeah, no, it's hard to see, and it's hard for me to see more than kind of, or some weeks it's hard to see more than one day out, but even in other weeks, hard to see more than kind of a year to 18 months out. So 3 to 5 years is a long way out. Certainly, if we get to a point that in 5 years that the company is a great asset for a larger company, then we're not morally opposed to ever selling. Of course, if it made sense for employees, for us, for the investors, for the acquirer, of course. But in the next couple years, we're pretty laser focused on growing. We have a good opportunity in front of us. We have some integrations with the major marketing clouds that give us an advantage in the space. So, and as I mentioned about the referrals, when you can see brands coming to you, walking in the door saying, "We've heard about you, we want to use this," that gives you motivation to keep growing and keep building the team. So, in terms of what we look like, we'll likely have done another funding round in that window in the next couple of years. So we will be larger. I don't know the exact ratio. Will go from 25 people to whether we'll triple or quadruple. I don't have that planned well in advance, but we'll certainly be larger. I would bet we will have more than a San Francisco office. In this game, you probably want people who in sales are closer to different customers. A lot of our customers are on the East Coast, and a lot of brands are in the Midwest. So I imagine we'll have more than a San Francisco office when you and I talk in 2 years. And what's a question mark is international expansion. We have a lot of international companies using us now, but still the vast majority of our revenue is U.S. So we're very U.S. focused now. But in 3 years, of course, if there's an opportunity to sell to the European market with a London office, then and if we're still growing, then we'd be fortunate enough to have that opportunity.
Okay. And you guys are currently doing some hiring right now. What positions are you looking to fill?
Yeah, so we're actively hiring for sales and marketing roles right now, and we'll soon be hiring for some additional engineering roles. So anyone who enjoys selling and building product for large brands and having your work impact the products that you see on the shelf in the grocery store and in any retail environment, we'd encourage you to check us out. So if I can give a plug for survata.com/jobs, or of course, if any of your listeners want to contact me, my email is chris@survata.com, if it's okay if I give that out on your
Sure.
show.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Happy to hear from your listeners for any questions or feedback, or if anyone thinks someone they know would love to work with us.
Perfect. Do you guys let any of your employees work remote, or is everyone under the same roof at this point?
So right now everyone's under the same roof, just because it's easier for us to grow the team, and we've always been the environment of everyone in San Francisco. But certainly that can change as we grow. And as I mentioned, if having different field offices for sales relationships makes sense, then so be it.
What are three companies that you would love to work with that you're not working with yet?
Great question. So we would love to work with some of the big automobile companies. It's one industry that has a lot of big brands that we're not as tapped into as we should be. So if someone from Ford or Mercedes-Benz is listening, please give us a call. we
There you go.
we
That's
also
why I asked the question.
There you go. And then we also love working with major restaurants. So if anyone from major restaurant groups is is listening, I don't think we've done anything with Wendy's at a large scale as an
Okay, so
example that
typically,
pops
so
in my head.
chains, right? Chains that we would all recognize the name.
Yeah, large brand. So the quick rule of thumb for us is if consumers recognize a company name, then it's likely a brand, and they view themselves as a brand, and that's who a good customer for us would be. So that's really anyone that your audience has heard of is someone that we'd want to go after
Okay,
from a brand standpoint.
perfect. So automakers and large restaurant food chains. If you had to throw a third category in there, what would it be?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, our top category is actually CPG. So to answer your question again, I think we're not
Which
doing,
is consumer product goods, right?
yeah, consumer packaged goods. So
Oh,
that's
packaged
the
goods.
soap,
Okay.
the deodorant, the toothpaste, anything you see on a shelf. So I don't think we're doing any work with Kraft Heinz, which is probably the largest
Yeah.
CPG company we're not working with. So that would be, to answer your question, a brand that we'd love to get. If anyone out there has a friend working at Kraft Heinz, and give us a call.
Do you guys ever turn away business? Either from certain companies or from certain industries. Like I'm thinking, fashion and clothing might be really hard, right?
Yeah, we haven't. The only one we don't we have to turn away is kind of specific medical interviews around. Like we can work with companies that sell over the counter drugs. It's hard for us to work with companies selling just prescription drugs. So
Right.
because
Okay.
there's a variety of rules and certifications and different factors to interviewing people based on the fact that they have a specific condition. So we have to be very careful there. So we have to sometimes say no to that as an example. Um, and then also if someone I'm trying to think of an example. Maybe if someone's audience was too small. So if there was a very tiny brand that just didn't have a website, didn't have a CRM, didn't have any advertising campaigns. If they don't have any of those touch points with consumers that I mentioned, then our value prop is less strong. So there's might be times where if someone is just launching a sneaker company but they don't really have any momentum yet, then we won't be a fit for them until they start growing and have some momentum.
And now, where do you draw the line between brand intelligence and market research? Where a company is thinking about putting a product in the market and they're just trying to figure out if the consumer is even interested in that product and maybe what they're willing to pay for it. Does that ever happen?
Yeah, we view brand intelligence as a superset of market research and customer research and advertising research. So the brand intelligence positioning is that kind of the 360 view of the customer. So before you even launch a product and you're just researching the market about whether there's an opportunity there, to then you launch your marketing efforts and you want to make sure that your marketing campaigns are working. And then, of course, once someone becomes a buyer, you want to make sure that your brand is still well positioned in their head once they're a buyer. So we view them as kind of market research being a subset of one of the pieces of brand intelligence.
Cool. Before we wrap up here, I mean, anything that we skipped over that you wanted a chance to mention?
I don't think so. This has been a great chat, and people, as you mentioned, can learn more at Survata.com or can email me, Chris, CHRIS, at Survata.com, and I'll try to get back to any questions. And yeah, it's been fun to tell our story to your audience, and hope we get some good questions.
Awesome. I appreciate your time today, man. Sounds like you guys are doing a lot of good stuff over there. Unfortunately, I don't have a big enough brand yet with my company where I can hire
Yeah,
you, but
someday, someday.
someday,
Yeah.
absolutely, someday, no doubt. So, well, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it. I look forward to staying in touch with you, and best of luck with everything else you guys are doing.
Thanks, Jonah. Take care.
Thanks, guys. Bye bye.